And it goes without saying that I have zero expertise in American law whatsoever. I'm not even going to touch it. I'm not even going to try to compare it, really. We'll make the bridges and our connections ourselves. I'm also not going to look at the responsa of thousands of years. I'm going to go back to primary sources, biblical and Talmudic. There's a few post-Talmudic texts we'll look at, but primarily I'm interested in frameworks and categories. My background is twofold. One, in spending a lot of time studying Choshen Mishpat, which a lot of rabbis don't study usually, but it's the area of law that deals with this civil and criminal law within Jewish thought. And secondly, my doctoral work is in psychology and epistemology. So I think about the nature of truth, subjective and objective truth, and in particular, this issue of compulsion. To start off, I think the question, because we're not really asking moral questions, we're asking legal questions. Of course, there are some intersections, but the issue of free will. Famously, we know that the three strongest cases against free will were made by Jews, right? Karl Marx, he said we are most influenced by our socioeconomic status, right? And Freud, who said we're most influenced by our early childhood experiences. And Spinoza, who said it's our inner disposition, essentially our genes. We know all three of those are true. Our genetic disposition, our socioeconomic status, and certainly our early childhood experiences are huge factors in who we are. And yet, Jewish thought continues to say there is responsibility and there is free will, even given all of those factors. And where is the gray area? Where one is completely not responsible and one is completely responsible? And what is the area where there will be mitigating factors in regards to punishment and responsibility based upon those crimes? Now, one of the interesting categories, looking at early Talmudic rabbis, is the category of the shoteh. Anyone know who the shoteh is? The shoteh is the mentally ill. Right? Now, the mentally ill is not someone of a lower intellectual capacity. Right? We're not dealing with a category like a Down syndrome or something like this. They're dealing with schizophrenia and paranoia, right? Or someone who has delusions or the like. And the shoteh in Jewish law is completely exempt from crimes. Completely exempt. And is not even a legal agent. Considered a legal agent. And that's very interesting. That pre-modernity, I mean, we're talking 1,500 years ago and more, the category of the shoteh is someone who is off the hook. Now, who falls into that today is an interesting question. Now, the other thing that's interesting, we have also the category of shogeg versus mazid. Shogeg means something that's done unintentionally versus mazid, something that's done intentionally. Intentionality is an issue we'll circle back around to for sure. Now, what's interesting is a lot of the laws around punishments that we read in the Bible, the Torah itself, are kind of done away with by the rabbis for various reasons. What's the most typical punishment that's done away with?
Stoning your kid, your
son. Yeah. Say again?
You're stoning your son.
Oh, yeah, so that's a big one. We could do a whole class on this issue of stoning one's son. Actually, you know what that case is really about? If one's child takes their parents' money and spends it on excessive meat and alcohol without the parents' permission, that child should be stoned because they are irredeemable. They're irredeemable. Okay, so it's called the Sora Umora. So bracketing that category, yes, stoning as one of them, but essentially the death penalty. Right? If you read the Bible itself, you would think death penalty is permitted. Right? And the rabbis basically make it impossible. What's the primary mechanism that they make it impossible? It's called hatra'ah. Hatra'ah means giving a warning. That means there need to be two witnesses at the moment of the crime who say, clarify your name, clarify the act you're about to do, and clarify that you understand the full consequences and the weight of the action you're about to do. And if they confirm in front of these two witnesses, I know what I'm about to do, and I know the consequences, and they do all these things, then they can be put to death, which is virtually impossible. Now, there's an interesting discussion, a lot of literature on Kabbalat Hatra'ah. What constitutes as Kabbalat Hatra'ah? Accepting the warning that one is given. And actually, an interesting question in American law: would a crime of passion be different if one had a warning at that moment? For example, one walks in, the classic case, right, and they see their spouse is cheating on them, and in that state of rage, kill the two of them, right? And now the mitigating factor that this is rage, it's not premeditated, and everything else. Now, what if there was a fourth person in the room who said, I want you to know that you're about to kill your spouse and your spouse's lover, and I want you to know the penalty that will come. Would in that state of rage, a warning actually, have any weight at all also? Okay, now there's another category called ruach shtut, which is a state of insanity, essentially. That wrongs done in this state are understood differently also in this state of insanity. We will circle back to that as well. Now, from a philosophical category, we might ask, what's the purpose of punishment? What's the purpose of a punishment? Is this primarily a consequentialist ethic, where we're trying to either look at the crime from a consequentialist ethic of how much how much damage was done, or from a deterrence perspective of what will be achieved for the good of the victim, for the good of the perpetrator, for the good of society at large? Is this deontological? We're interested in just desserts and the like. What is actually the goal of what we're doing here? And I think that the notion of the mental state of the perpetrator there has a lot of relevance. Is this a person who is likely to commit this crime again? Is this a person of bad character, right? Or is this a person who, in a particular state, may have done something horrible, and are we punishing the consequence again, or punishing the character? Are we bringing in virtue ethics to some degree here as well? Okay, so let's jump into the sources. Everyone have the sources? By the way, do you remember this famous Phoenix case? I only just recently learned about this in my research. There's a book called The Death of a Jewish American Princess. Does everyone know about this? Everyone knows about this. No, everyone doesn't know about this. So, The Death of a Jewish American Princess, the true story of a victim. So this actually, sadly, is a Phoenix case about a Jewish couple. And a man, Steven Steinberg, here in the community, who's well known in the community apparently, killed his wife by stabbing her 26 times. Hi Molly. How you doing? Hi Colin, how are you? Come on in. Let's make sure they get a packet. So Steven Steinberg killed his wife by stabbing her 26 times, and he was acquitted. Why was he acquitted? Because he argued, his legal defense portrayed the victim as an overpowering Jewish American princess whose excesses may have provoked her violent end. I mean, is that crazy? If you haven't read this book, it's got to be a fascinating read. People knew this guy in the community. This was in 1982. So, and they wrote this murder novel about this case. That he was acquitted because he only killed his wife because he was overpowered by her being a Jewish American princess. So anyways, it's a fascinating case to look at. Okay, let's start with the Tosfot, our first source here, the Tosfot Sanhedrin. This is a medieval commentary on the Talmud. And it says here that perhaps in that case, Rava's statement that a person suspected of sexual immorality remain credible witnesses. The reason is that their inclination overpowers them to the extent that they're considered compelled. Their yetzer, their inclination, means they're overcome by ones. And ones is the key phrase we're going to use this whole session. Ones means they are compelled. There's duress, essentially. Okay? Now, this is a case where, in American law, this would have, these details would make no sense. But essentially, one who is constantly guilty of these sexual immorality crimes is no longer considered a credible witness. However, if they are not a person who ideologically or by conviction engages in such acts, but does it in a moment of temptation, right? I imagine in divorce law, I'm just totally imagining, that one who is sort of, we would never call them a serial adulterer, but one who is a consistent adulterer, as opposed to someone who in a rare moment of temptation finds themselves in a situation, might have a different factor. So here there's an onus that the person is compelled. They're not an ideological person who engages in these types of wrongs, but someone who can't control their own temptations. Okay, jump to source 2 here. The Or HaChaim, he's an early 18th century Morocco thinker, so we're kind of skipping locations and generations. And he says here on his commentary on Numbers, everyone who sins because they are overcome by seduction and desire for pleasure should be judged to some extent as compelled. This is called Sad HaOnes, right? That, again, this is about someone who can't control desire, as different from someone who has a particular character or someone who has a particular ideology. Now, something emerges around self-defense. According to Jewish law, if someone comes into one's home and one doesn't know their intent, one should assume they are here to cause physical harm, potentially even murder. And thus, there's three positions as to my response. Either I must strike down the person entering my home before they strike me down. I'm obligated to strike them down in self-defense. Or I don't have to, but I may. Or I should not, but if I do, I'm exempt. Right? It's asur aval patur. It's forbidden, but I am exempt from any punishment if I do. Okay, so that's a little background around the issue of self-defense. And it says here in Rav Yosef Bechor Shor, on his commentary on Exodus, if the thief is found in a tunnel, this means that one who strikes the thief is not considered a bloodshedder, for he is like one who is compelled. Now, here's the interesting part of this. For people cannot restrain themselves when their money is at stake. Here, the issue is that this is not self-defense for my life, but actually I'm concerned about property damage, and I'm so concerned about someone destroying my property in a pre-insurance age that I might do things in response to defending my property that I wouldn't normally do. Road rage. You ever see these viral YouTubes where people jump out of their car and they start fighting in the streets? I mean, maybe they're people who like to fight, but presumably they're also, there's an issue of road rage, they're concerned about their car, and whatever the case is. Okay, let's go to Zvachim, in the Talmudic passage of Zvachim. Here we're compelled by religion. Rava said, this law I learned from Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, in the lavatory. He learned this in the bathroom. But did not Rabbi Bar Chana say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, one may think about Torah every place except the bathhouse and the lavatory. When he is compelled, it's different. Okay, so what's this about? We're not allowed to study Torah in the bathroom, right? Because it's an impure place, and we shouldn't think about something like Torah in the bathroom. But what's the case here? There's someone that they can't control their thoughts. They love learning Torah so much that they can't control that love, or they simply can't control their mind in general. Now that's an interesting legal question of how much control do we have over thought and over desire as opposed to our actions themselves. So that's kind of a whole different realm. I'm kind of flying through these complex sources. Now we go to makot. How about revenge? How powerful is the motive of revenge? Now, here there's a category called Ir HaMiklat in the Bible. Ir HaMiklat is the city of refuge. The city of refuge primarily is a case, let me give an example, where there's unintentional murder. Right? One is swinging an axe to hit their tree, and the handle flies off, the blade flies off, and hits someone. And so they have committed unintentional murder, and that person now has the right, or maybe obligation, to flee to the city of refuge. For a different session, the city of refuge is a fascinating model for an alternative to mass incarceration. Let's bracket that. Now, here's where the interesting thing emerges. There's a category that emerges called the Goel Hadam. The Goel Hadam is the redeemer of blood. So how did it work in tribal societies? Who's the redeemer of blood? Family. Someone accidentally kills your family member. You don't wait for the court system to operate this way or that. Family member goes and executes tribal justice, right? So the Goel Hadam emerges, and now here's where the machloket emerges, the argument. According to the Tanaim, the early rabbis of the Talmud, I'm using a lot of Hebrew, but I'm translating it, so just for those interested in that. Some say the Goel Hadam is a mitzvah. It's an obligation to redeem the blood of the person who committed accidental murder, right? Unintentional murder, excuse me. And some say it's not obligatory, but it's a reshut. It's permitted. Okay? And here we're dealing with intentional, a crime that's intentional but not premeditated, which I think we call second-degree murder, right? And so this case of the Goel Hadam is this redeemer of blood, which is a fascinating case. But no one says it's asur aval patur. It's forbidden to do it, but they're exempt. Essentially, either this is about justice. Yes, he didn't mean it, but you killed him. And part of moral life is not merely about not intentionally committing crimes, but creating a life where you don't accidentally create horrible crimes. The way we drive and the way we handle weapons and things like this. So some might say this is about justice. Others might say this is about a passion crime. This is about a person who can't control the fact that their spouse was just killed, or their child was just killed. And thus, we have to have some mercy on this person, that in the state of rage, where they go and kill this person who killed their child, they will not be punished for that. Now, the Ir HaMiklat, the city of refuge, the person who unintentionally commits this crime runs as fast as they can to the city of refuge. If they get there, they're safe. Sounds like a board game, right? But if they get there, they're safe, right? Meaning the Goel Adam, the blood redeemer, cannot kill them inside. If they do that, they're a murderer. But as they're running to the city of refuge, on the way, the Goel Adam is permitted or obligated to strike that person down. Okay, is the case clear? Okay, so here it says in Makot, Talmud Makot, Rav Huna said, if the blood avenger finds and kills the accidental homicide on the road to a city of refuge, he is exempt from punishment. He is patur. Okay, now on this we see the Amek Davar, the commentary on this. He's 19th century Warsaw, Poland. 19th century Warsaw. His name is Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda of Berlin. Fascinating thinker. And he says here, for he did not hate, which is, he's quoting the Bible there. The meaning is that the blood avenger did not previously hate the accidental homicide, but rather his heart heats and brings him to the point of killing, and he is like the one whose heart compels him. We'll pause there. So here he's dealing with, if you already hated the person, the Goel Adam cannot strike him down, the Redeemer blood, right? Because that shows there's already hate there. However, if it's a momentary or a situational hate that emerges in this case, then it's different, right? It's not premeditated, and he didn't hate him previously. That's part of the requirement here around this blood redeemer. Okay, last two sources. I know we're going quickly. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. We'll hold those questions until after Mr. Taylor's presentation. And we go to the strength of desire. How strong is desire? Eruvin 41a. The rabbis taught 3 things compel people to transgress their own wills and that of their master. Idolaters, evil moods, and the stress of poverty. Right? So idolaters. I don't know. What is idolater? So let's say here, let's call this religious fanatics. Right? How do we understand a suicide bomber? Right? How do we understand a terrorist? Right? Now we may understand him simply as a moral category. That's an evil person. That's one way people think of it, a terrorist. That's an evil person. Right? But do we understand a terrorist who's emerging from poverty and religious fanaticism? I'm not in any way justifying, God forbid, justifying any acts of terror. But do we understand that person and their crime differently? Let's say there's I was going to say 12-year-old, but being a minor is a whole other category. Let's say there's a young adult, 18 or a 20-year-old who has been raised in a religious fanaticism and extreme poverty and engages in an act of terror. Should that person be prosecuted, punished in the same way that someone not raised under those conditions should be punished? So that's idolater. Evil moods. Here the rabbis are talking about psychology. Evil mood is a little bit of a light translation. And then the stress of poverty. How do we understand financial duress? Let's say there's a millionaire and they go bankrupt. How do we understand someone in a state of losing all of their wealth? So, something they do in that moment of desperation. Is there a clarifying question? Yes, please.
About the idolaters.
Yeah.
But I thought under Jewish law, that's one of the 3 things for which a person must lay down their life if they're asked to do it.
Great question.
So how could it be that they would be perceived or interpreted?
Okay, great. So what I think what you're proposing is that someone in a clear state of mind who has proposed to engage in idolatry should die according to Jewish law before engaging in idolatry. However, here we're talking about one who's compelled, who is operating within the framework of idolatry.
Once they're already an
idolater, they are compelled from within their intellectual, spiritual framework of idolatry.
I see.
Right? That they are so immersed in their need to serve this statue, to bow to this statue, or in modern notions of idolatry, that they idolize money, or they idolize self, or self-image, or whatever the case is. I mean, that's interesting, self-image. Right? What about someone who is compelled, but does a crime because they are there's a track record of they are completely obsessed with their image, or whatever the case is. Okay, so in these cases they lose free will. Okay, now here's our last text, and then I'm gonna hand it over here. The Rush, the commentary on Moed Katan, another Talmudic passage, says Rabbi Eli's statement is not legal precedent Rather, even when a person's inclination overpowers him, he's required to quiet it. For we hold that Hakol biyadei shemayim chutz miyirat shemayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven except the fear of heaven. Now that line itself we could debate over and over. There's a lot of commentary on that. But basically the other way we understand it is that yirat shemayim means moral life. A lot of things are outside of the control of humanity, such things like nature, things like how systems operate beyond human control. Lots of complicated things that one might attribute to God or to nature or to system dynamic. But there is this thing called yirat shemayim, fear of heaven, which could be understood here of moral choices. And those are completely in the realm of the human realm. And so even though we are compelled, feel compulsion or duress based on many factors, we are to quiet those desires and those inclinations and to gain control. So here I will pause and merely say that it is Judaism places a heavy emphasis on the value of free will and on our free moral choices, but also is deeply concerned about punishment which is not just, and individuals being punished who are not of bad character or not likely to commit other crimes, but have one-off either accidents or unintentional mistakes, or people who have moments of compulsion of various kinds, or people of mental illness. Again, pre-modernity, 1,500 years ago, the rabbis had this category of the shota, or people who act unintentionally, but shogeg as opposed to bemazid, and have to figure out this balance of accountability and the needs of victims, but also a just society that also takes into the mental states and the various mitigating factors of the perpetrator herself or himself as well.